Hi everyone, my name is Carolyn Bona. If you don't know me, I am the District 3 representative for Pennsylvania DECA. The Google Hangout series is a competition prep series that PA started this year to increase communication and competition skills within our members. So this is the third one we're having. This one will be on test-taking strategies. With me tonight, I have Mrs. Majors from Freedom High School. She's the advisor there, and Tara Nath, who served as the 2014-2015 PA DECA State President and is currently the North Atlantic Region Vice President. So we are going to have Mrs. Majors talk first. She's going to let you know what to do when you're preparing for the test, and then Tara will talk to you about what to do while you're actually taking the test. On the left side of your screen, there should be a spot for questions. If you have any, feel free to ask them there or tweet them at us, and we'll be happy to answer them. So, Mrs. Majors is having a little bit of technical difficulties. We can't see her yet, but we can hear her. And Mrs. Majors, if you would like to begin, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Good evening, Pennsylvania DECA. Whenever I have my students preparing to take the test, I always make sure that obviously the first thing they do is start with the old tests, any old tests that your advisors can give you, and they take them as many times as possible. Any of the key concepts that they are struggling with, ask your advisor. They're a great resource for you. Additionally, I always go through the role plays and pick out the performance indicators from the previous years, whatever they did, whatever I can find. And I take those and I define them for the students, and those are a great resource to study. It helps you be aware of what the marketing and business terms that they're looking for on the role play, but it also helps you for the test, because I found that a lot of the areas are basic marketing questions. Advertising, economics, there's some on ethics and accounting. So those main topics keep popping up over and over. So those are always a good resource whenever you're trying to study. Additionally, if your advisor has any textbooks or any resource books that they have in their room, so you can start reading about the area. If you are trying to go into finance, get some books on finance and read them. You can get books on, pick out chapters out of a textbook and read those. And then the other thing that I found that my students have found very helpful was actually to talk to somebody in that field. If you can talk to them, show them some of the tests, maybe a couple role plays, they might be able to give you an insight on things that are important and some concepts. They might be able to explain it better in a different way that might help you on the test.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Majors makes some great points there, especially with looking at the performance indicators on the role plays. If those are a performance indicator, then clearly there's something that DECA wants us to recognize, so it's very likely that they will show up on the test, maybe not in the exact same form, but knowing the content is extremely important. Mrs. Majors, did you have anything else you wanted to add right now?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it.
All right, then we're going to go over to Tara, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what to do as you're taking the test.
Thank you, Carolyn. Hello, Pennsylvania DECA. It's great to be back. Just one more thing, building off of what Mrs. Majors said. If your advisor does not have any materials, DECA Images is a great resource for you. So you can go online and check all of those things out. There's things you can purchase, and then DECA also has a competitive events app that would be great to check out during your test preparation process. Just didn't want you to forget about that. So taking a test, that can be a daunting thing, but there's a lot that you can do to make it not as scary when you're taking it. So I think the number one thing that you have to look at is you have to look at what the question is asking. So is it asking for something that's verbal? Is it looking for something that's positive or negative? Who's it talking about? If you're able to narrow that down in the question, you'll be able to see out of the 4 answer possibilities which one it could be. You can narrow it down in that sense. So the ways that you can narrow it down are positive and negative, like I just said. So if it says something like, one reason many sportswear businesses encourage team building. When it says encouraging team building, you see that as something that's positive. So if you look through your answer choices and you have strong relationships, competition, diversity, and aggression, you can see that strong relationships out of the 4 of those is the more positive one. So that's one way that it's really easy just to look through, really helps you narrow down everything else. So the next thing that I normally look at is, can 3 of the answer possibilities be grouped together? A lot of times there will be a question and 3 of the answer choices will be extremely similar. So you could have words that are such as like firm, strict, rigid. How would you ever pick between those? I don't think DECA expects you to. That's why none of them are going to be the right answer. And the 4th one that's going to be something different, more than likely is that answer you're looking for. So that's definitely a really good way to narrow it down. Even if you have 2 words that are extremely similar, if you can't differentiate between them, you might be able to just knock those ones out. So our next thing here is we are going to look at whether it's internal or external for the questions. So is it asking something that is relating to the company in itself? So is it looking for how people within the company communicate? Or is it looking for how they reach people outside of their company in their target market? So that's something that really can, again, help you just narrow it down. Now, these aren't now all of the tips I'm giving you here, these aren't things that you can really study beforehand. That's the great thing about them, is you just know what they are. And then you just knock things off the list. So you could have no clue what the question's asking and use these tips and you'll be all good. So the other one I have is primary versus secondary. So whether the question's asking about first-hand research or if they're going to go out and find out something new from somebody, or find out something from somebody else, sorry. So that's another great way to narrow things down. So one of the things, though, I would say that's very helpful to memorize beforehand and to know when you're taking the test are your mixes. So you have the marketing mix, which is your 4 Ps, so product, price, place, and promotion. You'll normally find that on some exam. It's going to be in there somewhere. So just having that in the back of your head is a great thing to have. There's also the promotional mix, which is advertising, PR, sales promotion, and personal selling. So these are just quick memorization things that you'll more than likely see. And then there's the product service mix, which is just all of the company's products and services. So these are all just really good things that you know going into it. And then basically, if all else fails, eliminate as many choices as you can and just hope for the best. But with these tips that I just gave you, you really should be able to narrow it down to at least 2 answers and then use common sense for the rest. So, Carolyn, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Tara. Now, Tara touched on all the different mixes that often come up, and those are something that you'll really commonly see in your performance indicators. So that's another great example of that. It'll often ask you for the promotion, the product, things like that. So you can, if you know those for the test, that will also help you out in the role play. And I also wanted to talk about with the test questions that you need to make sure you know who the question is asking about. Sometimes it's asking about the company itself, sometimes it's asking about the employees, the customers, or the competitors. Because a lot of times there will be an answer or 2 that answers the question correctly, but not to the correct party. So you just want to make sure you're paying close attention to the wording of the question to make sure you're not only answering it correctly, but that you're answering it appropriately. Now, one more thing is that goes along with preparing and taking the test is making sure you have what you need to take the test. So you want to make sure that you have number 2 pencils. Those are the first most important thing. You can't take a test without them. So make sure you have a couple sharpened and ready to go. Now, in addition to that, even if you're not in a category that deals with math, a lot of times math questions will show up on your test. You want to make sure you have a calculator for those. The math is nothing complicated, but you're under a time restriction, so you want to make sure you can get it done as quickly as possible. Now, saying that, not all calculators are accepted by DECA. You want to make sure that you have a plain 4-function calculator on hand. You can purchase one of those through DECA Images if you're not sure of the regulations. The ones they sell are perfect. So, and with that being said, a lot of times the math questions have to do with vocabulary that you may not have heard before. So it's a great idea to look up just some common business math vocab words before you take the test, as it is with any kind of vocab words. Any business vocab sheets out there will definitely help you, because I would say the main roadblock that people have taking the test, after you use all of the strategies that Tara and Mrs. Majors presented to you, is just simply not knowing the vocab. You can definitely get by if you haven't heard the words before, but if you have heard them, you'll be at a definite advantage over your competitors. Anything either of you two would like to add?
I would like to add that, I'm sorry, Tara.
No, go ahead.
If you are given an hour to take your test, I know like all teachers say this, but use your time wisely. If you finish early, go back over and look at some of those. And while most of the time your first choice is the correct one, it's not a bad idea to go over them, some of the ones that you didn't know, and think about them again. Maybe something later in the test will trigger you to remember, or it will trigger, hey, maybe this one means something based on this question. So it might give you some clues farther down the test. So if you're given time, make sure that you answer all of the questions and you use your time wisely. Don't leave early. Make sure you do well on that test.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. Even if you finish early, there's no rush to get out of there. You can stay as long as you need until time's up, and keep checking your answers, going over them, checking your math especially, making sure that everything's right. If even the questions you thought you were sure on, it never hurts to go back and just check them one more time. Tara, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to build off of something that Mrs. Majors did say earlier. She mentioned that it's really useful to go through old exams and do those as practice, but I want to make sure that you know not just to do your cluster exam. Excuse me. For me, I always was in a marketing cluster exam, but I would do all of the different clusters, because that way, whenever in my exam I'd come across those finance questions, I would still have an idea what I was doing because I had prepared thoroughly for anything that could come at me. So I would go through and take all of the different exams, and then at the end go through with the answer keys and see what I got right, and then read DECA's description that they provide for the answers, because that way you can kind of see the way DECA thinks about a question, and that can be useful whenever you're taking your exam also.
Yeah, and as Tara mentioned with going through the answers, even when you're trying to learn the vocab, the answers that DECA Inc. provides is a great resource. A lot of times they, even if the question's not a definition question, they still explain the meaning of the word in their answer, and those are extremely useful. All right, so with all that being said, let's check if we have any questions from our viewers tonight. All right, so they want to know how we manage our time since there are so many questions. So, Mrs. Majors, what do you tell your students about their time management?
Well, I tell them to read the question and answer it if they know it. And if they do not know it right away, don't sit there and think about it, but go on to the next one. And then that's where the extra time at the end, go back through. It's 100 questions and you have an hour, so logically you would be halfway through at 30 minutes. So you should be on number 50. And try to pace yourself so that a quarter of the way through you've answered 25. It's always a good idea to wear a watch so you don't get stuck at the end. But don't spend too much time on any one question that you don't know. Skip it and come back to it.
That's some great advice. Tara, would you like to add anything?
I was just going to say the wear a watch part. One of the other things I always did was at the top of my exam, I would write the time it was when it starts, because while you're taking the test, you aren't, I mean, I know I don't remember. I'm so focused on the questions. So it was always good to do that, because a lot of times the test proctors, they will say, okay, you have half an hour left. You have 15 minutes left. But if you have a watch on and you know exactly what time the exam started, you'll better be able to gauge that time on your own without relying on the proctors to tell you how much time you have left.
Yeah, that's really important to keep track of it for yourself. I also wanted to mention that every question is worth 1 point. So don't forget about that, that just because one question is really tricky, it's only worth the same amount as another one that's quite simple for you. So don't waste all your time fretting over one question. question because that's only 1 point. It's only one full score of the test. So penalty for so you are making those guesses if you've educated one. All those wonderful tips, I wanted to ask each of you if you had one tip that you find to be the most important thing for people to take away from this, what would that be?
I can go first this time. I would definitely say that my #1 tip would be to trust your gut and to use your common sense. If you read a question and you just feel an inclination towards a certain answer, more than likely that's going to be the one, especially if you come back and you start second guessing it, but for no necessarily good reason. Normally try to go with that gut answer. Just one other thing on top of that, so I'm going to give two, is use your work experience and your past experience that you have in real life to come up with that common sense. So just be logical based on what you know. A lot of times you'll be choosing an event based on something you have experience in. So be sure to recall the logic that you learn in your life and in your work and make sure that translates to your test.
Right, of course. And that also goes back to what Mrs. Majors told us at the beginning about getting to talk to real-world people that have jobs in the fields that you're taking the test on. The real world is what DECA is based off of. It's a great resource. Your jobs, your personal experiences, the things you learn from those are extremely helpful when you're taking the test. All right, Mrs. Majors, do you have one very important tip for us?
The one thing that I would recommend is that everyone puts in time, even if it's 15 minutes a day, and do a few questions. Do not wait until the night before the test. Do not wait until you're in the bus and you're on your way to your event, because by then that's not enough time. And if you have studied as hard as you can and as much as you can, then you have the confidence to go in there and calmly sit down without all the nerves and take your test and do the best job that you can. Don't get nervous because you're sitting next to somebody that this is their 4th year and you're just a freshman, or you have studied and you've done everything that you can and you are just as good as everyone else, and you can do this, and calm down and breathe.
Yes, I think that's a great point. I know we all get nervous before we're taking our test, before we're doing our role plays. DECA means a lot to all of us. I'm pretty sure we all really care about placing well, but you need to be confident in order to do that. So as you're taking the test, slow down, take a deep breath, make sure you keep an eye on the clock, but there's no need to rush. Read every question carefully, know what it's asking, know who it's asking about, and eliminate as many choices as you can so that you can, even if you don't know it, you can make the most educated guess possible. All right, with all that being said, I think we covered a lot tonight, and I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you, Mrs. Majors. Thank you, Tara, for joining us tonight. Your advice was wonderful. It'll really help out PA, so thank you again.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you for having me.